All right, welcome everybody. I'm very excited to welcome you to this Get Out the Vote training with Democracy Maine. We're so appreciative to have Democracy Maine as a Maine Initiatives grantee and to have them be willing to share their expertise and experiences here with all of us. I want to, again, just appreciate everybody for taking the time today. And I'll, say a little hi for anyone who is watching this as a recording. And I just want to remind folks that there may be some interruptions as we work from home or from places that aren't our traditional workspaces, kids, dogs, who knows what, and that I appreciate everybody's flexibility as we go through this workshop. So thank you so much. And at this point, I'm going to hand things over to Anna Kellar, the Director of Democracy Maine.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, thanks for being here, everyone, for having us. So I will talk a little bit about some of the best practices that we've been learning around getting out the vote, some of the questions that have been coming up this election, which in some ways is throwing up new obstacles and new challenges and also some new opportunities for us around getting folks involved in the election. And then joining me from Democracy Maine is Lado Ladoka, who is our program director and has been doing a lot of get out the vote work out in the field. And so Lado can also talk about some of what he's been seeing and some of the work that he's doing, which I know a few of you have already been involved in. And we've been, having fun, learning a lot as we go through things this fall. So the election this year is probably, as you all know, incredibly important and causing a lot of anxiety for a lot of people. There are a lot of questions floating around about how to vote, what is the safest way, what is the most secure way, what is the most reliable way to vote, and a lot of concern about having your vote counted. So I just want to start not assuming that you all know all about the background around voting. Forgive me if this is going to be stuff that you're already familiar with, but I think it's worth just a quick refresher. Maine has really strong voting laws in general. There's multiple ways that you can vote. And we also have a few flaws in our system that we have to work around. But I want to pull up just a quick image here. Alrighty, yep, that's not the slide I was looking for. Just a second. Here we go. Are you seeing early voting deadlines? Awesome. So we've got essentially 3 ways to vote. In Maine, you can go in person on election day to your polling place. You can vote absentee by mail, request a ballot, have it delivered to you, put it back in the mail and return it. And then you also have the option of voting in-person absentee. And so, which involves going down to your town office, city hall, and requesting and filling out and returning an absentee ballot right on the spot. And that's an increasingly popular way for people who like the feeling of voting in person and handing off the envelope to the person who's going to count it, but want to avoid lines and help with social distancing with election day. So we saw this in our primary election. More people than ever have been voting absentee and voting in-person absentee to help with avoiding the problems that COVID has caused for us with this election. We are encouraging everyone who can vote by mail or vote early in person to do so, just because we know some people are still going to need to go in person on election day. it's really important that we still have that option. But the more that we can get it done early, and this is going to be my refrain, getting your voting done early, the more that that can happen, the safer it's going to be for the people who do have to go in person, and for the poll workers. If we don't have long lines, if we don't have crowding, it'll make it much easier for people who need to use same-day voter registration, or who don't have reliable mail, or for any other reason need to go on election day. So just quick refresher on absentee voting, because Maine system is a little different than how it works in other states. And I think as people read the news, there is some confusion going around. In Maine, you have to get your ballot into your clerk by 8 p.m. on election day. In some other states, it's you have to mail it by that day. In Maine, it has to get to them by that day. And so we're encouraging people to, if you're going to return your ballot by mail, make sure that you're leaving at least a week for that delivery. If you do that, it should be just fine. Mail is reliable. We just need to make sure we're leaving some extra time. The alternative is either bringing in your ballot in person, or dropping it in a drop box. And most towns, but not all towns, have a secure drop box outside of their outside of the town hall that people can drop off a ballot in. We wish everyone did, but not everyone does. But you do have the option of bringing it physically to the town hall. An immediate family member can do that for you, but otherwise you have to bring it in yourself. So I will also just say a quick word about voter registration, because that's sort of the other piece of this puzzle. In Maine, we're lucky we've got same-day voter registration. And you can vote, which means you can go to your polling place, register to vote, and vote right up through 8 p.m. on election day. There's no cutoffs. But if you need to register and you don't want to go in person, or you're not able to go in person, there is a cutoff for mailing it. It has to be received by the clerk by October 19th. And that's the same deadline for a third-party voter registration drive. So the League of Women Voters, part of Democracy Maine, we do a lot of voter registration work. And for us, any of those voter registrations that we help people with, they have to get back to the town by October 19th, and the same for an individual mailing in a voter registration. We're encouraging people to register as early as possible, not wait to election day, get it done. If you know you need to register and you are able to go in and do things in person, going by town hall, registering, requesting your ballot, filling it out on the spot, and returning it is an easy way of doing all of these things at once. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch base on is just a little out of order, but requesting an absentee ballot. So there are deadlines to request an absentee ballot without an excuse. So you don't need to have any particular reason in Maine to get an absentee ballot, but there is a cutoff for requesting them. So if you are requesting it by mail, online, by phone, you have to do it by October 29th. We actually said by mail, thinking about time to get there, time to get back. The last day to mail in a request would be October 15th. But you can call up or do it online by the 29th. That is the Thursday before the election. You can still go vote in-person absentee if your town has offices that are open on, sorry, there's seems to be a loud noise on my end here, but you can have in-person absentee voting through the Friday if your town is open on a Friday. If you need to get an absentee ballot after that, you still can. You just have to have a reason, like being sick, being unable to leave your home, knowing that you're going to be out of town for an unexpected, absence that day. And you can still get an absentee ballot. There's a fire alarm testing going on in my building, which hopefully is going to stop. But I'm going to go on mute and pass it. Well, it did stop. But I think, anyway, this is sort of the point where I wanted to pass it off to Lado to talk about some of the barriers that the folks he's been talking to. What are some of the barriers he sees to people being able to vote, and what are some of the questions that have been coming up and ways to get around that?
Thank you, Anna. Yes. My target in terms of who we target to register them to vote or to get information out so that they will be able to participate in the process are people that we know will usually not turn out if nobody reached them. And so we identify those people by looking into the voter history. So if you look at the van, and then it will tell you exactly they rated it by 1, 2, or 3 the last 3 years in terms of how often does that person go and vote. So if people are consistently for the last 3 years showing up to vote, you can predict that this time they're going to go and vote. However, if they are inconsistent in terms of their voting history, then that tells us that if we don't reach out, more likely they're not going to be able to vote, because voting is something that they know need to happen, but it's not as a priority that they will consistently vote every single time that there is an election that is coming. So we identify that population, and it happens to be that those are the low income people. So if there is a map that we put together, and in Portland, I think it's Parkside and goes to Bayside area. That is the area that always has the lower voter turnout. And so when we know that, then we will know exactly which neighborhood to target, because the resources are limited. So if we have enough resources, then we will say that everybody, just let's target them so that we increase the voter turnout. But since resources are limited, so we target the area that we think will be more effective. We also partner with the Avesta Housing and with the Immigrant Welcome Center. And so in the process, we are able to have more resources compared to if it was just Democracy Maine. So with the Avesta being a partner, we're able to get into their property and be able to not only register people to vote, but provide the literature in terms of knowing your rights to vote in Maine, but also how would you be able to obtain absentee ballot, and how are you able to go and show up and vote early. And now Avesta, since last year, they've been providing their tenants with a voter guide, which we produce every election season. This year, we're able to produce it earlier. So today is the day that Avesta is going to pick it up and distribute to their tenants. But we started out from Kittery. We made it all the way to Waterville, Maine. And we are back to Portland because Portland has the biggest population. And that is where we're going to spend a lot of time to be able to target the people that we need to show up and vote. So I will give you some anecdotes of people that I have met out there and what I'm able to learn. So one of my volunteers went and registered somebody in Gorham 2 days ago. We were out in Gorham, and they realized that if he didn't show up or knock at that door, there's no chance that individual will be able to go and vote. They were bed bound, so there's no way they will be able to get out of their bed to go and register to vote and do all the things that is required of every single of us to participate in the process. So they were able to register them, request their absentee ballot, and we turn those in so that that individual will be able to participate. Another one, I don't know if I can drop it on the chat. That is information that we got from Avesta. So I just pasted it on the chat, so you guys will be able to read it. But this individual, there is a property on Stevens Avenue, used to be Macaulay High School. And so we went there, campus the property, we left. The Avesta informed the tenants that the League of Women Voters is coming to do a voter registration, voter education. And so this person has been waiting for us for some reason. When we knock at the door, they didn't answer the door. So we hang the literature that we always leave behind for people who are not able to answer. And they were grateful that we came and left the information, but they still wanted to get in contact because they still need more help. So I was able to reach them, call them, at least left a message, but they were not able to call me back. So I assume that it's already taken care of. Another one on Oxford Street. So we knock at this door and the family opened a door. I asked if they're already registered to vote, and the daughter, who is, I think, maybe in the late 40s, say yes, she's registered to vote. She's going to vote absentee, blah, blah, blah. But my mother is not registered to vote. And then I realized she couldn't bring her mother out because of COVID-19. So the fear of exposing her mother to whatever exists out there was too big of a risk. So we were able to register that voter right there and request their absentee ballot so that they will never have to leave the safety of their own home. Another one on Stone Street. And so I knock at the door. It was maybe 6:45 or 6:50 p.m. And so the mother opened the door, couldn't speak any English, but I had my mask on that say vote. So she understood the word vote, but she didn't know much about what am I doing in her door. So she called her son in, who happened to be maybe 16 or 17 years old. And the son informed me that, oh, his mother has already voted. And so I thanked them. I was walking to the next door to knock, and the mother kept on talking. So I stopped, and they were back and forth. Of course, I don't understand the language, but I knew that the mother was not satisfied with what the son told me. So I stood there, and they were going back and forth, back and forth. And then I finally said that, okay, has your mother voted before? And he said, no. And then I said, okay, is she a US citizen? And he said, yes. And then I said, okay, your mother needs to register to vote. And so he translated that information to the mother, and the mother shook her head and said, yes, you need to register to vote. And so then I took the information, I registered them to vote. And those examples are just to demonstrate the fact that the population we are targeting, whether they are lacking the language, or they are disabled, or they happen to be a low income that voting is not a priority on their list, those are just things that compile into individual family or person, and it make it much difficult for them to prioritize voting, because voting is just one of the thing on their plate. For the rest of us, voting is on the highest priority that you can think of on any priority list. And one is that is what we do for living. And second, we understood the process much better than the people that we are targeting. But we also know the outcome of why we need to participate in the process. That is how we drive change. But for people who voting is just one of the challenges that they're dealing with, if we don't come out and actually do the work that we do, more likely the people that actually could benefit from the change that voting will bring to the system are the people that are least can afford to go out and vote. And that is why we target the population that we target, so that we will increase their voice in the process. And it will bring an outcome that will reflect what our community desire, or the outcome that will bring the biggest benefit to our community. Anna, you have something to add?
Thanks, Lado. Yeah, I mean, that's such a hit most of what I would add. I think the only thing that I would say in addition to that is that when we came up with this program, and when Lado came up with the idea that we would go door to door to register voters, I think we were not sure whether it was going to work or how effective it was going to be. And then again, with COVID, we've kind of had questions like, would this be possible? Would people mind if we came to the door? Would we still get volunteers? And each time I've just been so blown away by the response that we get. And so much of it, I think, is the human to human contact. And that also matches up with everything that's in the political science literature about what kinds of methods work to get out the vote and the best practices. Having contact from, the best is from someone you know, and working within existing social circles to talk to people about the importance of voting and make them feel like it's something that their community does, and that it's part of their norms and expectations. But even when it's a stranger, having a real person care about your voting and that your voice matters is really meaningful. So I think, above and beyond the actual services and literature and information that we're able to provide, it's also that, that knowledge that someone else thinks that you matter, and that your voice matters, and that you should have a part of this process. So we're also just, that's something I'm really happy about, that beyond the actual one thing we had also had talked about a little bit with speaking to folks in the immigrant community in particular, but also just, with folks who have, experienced marginalization or trauma at the hands of, of governments, of bureaucracies, of election processes, is that, voting is not always a simple or happy thing for people who've come from countries where election day is a day of violence, or certainly that their experience of voting is not that it's something that is, elections might be rigged, or that the results, don't bear a lot of, connection to what they want to see. And so it's something that, while, we certainly, go to naturalization ceremonies and see people who, are so excited to register to vote upon becoming citizens, and that there's a lot of pride in voting for some folks who are immigrants, but there's also, there's also some trauma associated with it for other folks, and that it's just worth keeping that in mind. And so I think as we're talking to people this election, one thing that I always try to keep in mind, and especially for, for more privileged white folks like me who are coming into doing this work, it's important to not do it from a perspective of lecturing or having, the idea like, of course you need to vote, it's so important, don't you get that it's so important, how could you not vote? Which I think is the natural feeling for some people who have always done it, that, they assume, well, if you're not voting, it must be because of apathy or because you just don't care. And recognizing that we don't know what life experiences people have had, and that sometimes, those fears can be valid, and that our system isn't perfect either, that there are, we have gerrymandering, we have, uncompetitive elections in places, we have problems with money in politics, we have the Electoral College, our votes, don't matter as much as they should. And yet, it's still worth voting, and if you recognize how our system is broken and all of the changes that we need to make in it and the ways in which it was, always designed to keep some people out of power, we know that voting alone isn't going to fix that, but it's also one piece, it's one little bit of power that we have. So, voting and then the advocacy and engagement that follows after that is also really important. This is, how we continue to make our votes be more meaningful. So that's something that I try to keep in mind as I do this work, that, it doesn't just end with election day, and that, and also when people are skeptical about voting, that, to try to engage with that seriously in conversation and not to be dismissive of, of people who don't vote as not caring. The other thing that we wanted to touch upon, and then I want to see if you've got questions, and we can also talk a little bit about some of the resources that we have to share for folks who are interested in spreading the word about, election and voting rights, is just about misinformation. And this election in particular, we're seeing so much information floating around, often shared with good intentions, sometimes shared with bad intentions. But what do you do when you see something being shared that isn't correct, and that you're afraid is going to mislead people, cause them to not vote? There are a few sort of best practices, especially with social media, that are just worth keeping in mind here. And I'm going to touch upon this as sort of these sort of social media best practices, and then I just want to say a little bit about how threats of election disruption kind of play into this for us. But the basic rules around misinformation and disinformation on social media is, don't engage with it. Don't click on the article, don't share the information, even if you're sharing it to say, look at this thing is wrong. By doing that, you're actually helping to spread it, because especially with Facebook, their algorithms don't care if your interaction is negative. You put a frowny face on it, that still counts as interaction, and it boosts it in the algorithm and makes more people see it. So rather than saying, sharing that bad information and trying to, do a little myth busting, it's better to just share good information. You can acknowledge that people might have seen things that were different, but put out the good information. And if you see somebody who is sharing bad information, it's better to message them privately, to talk to them about it, not actually on the post, because again, engaging with the post helps to drive it up in the algorithms. And so we're seeing not perfect, but some efforts from Facebook and from Twitter and other services to mark misinformation, and to take things down or to flag them. And so it's also worth reporting things, directly to Facebook or to whatever the server is. You can also, if you see misinformation out in the world, and not just on social media, you can also let us know. I'll put it up in a second, but we have a bunch of sort of voter information and voter question hotline and Facebook group resources, where sometimes we've had success in directly contacting people who are giving out misinformation and getting them to post corrections. Because, there are newspaper articles that get things wrong. We've seen town clerks put up things on their websites and get it wrong. And it's not malicious. It's just, this stuff can be confusing, and people can put up things that are accidentally wrong. So it's worth the effort to ask for corrections. They can, update a media story or put something in the paper the next day, and that's all worth doing in order to try to get people to have the right information. And then while it's easy in this moment to think about a lot of what ifs, what if armed protesters show up to polling places? What if Trump doesn't step down out of power? What if there are faulty drop boxes? What if? And that's, easy in my world, especially, to be thinking about all of those potential disaster scenarios. It's also something that I'm trying to rein in for myself, and to try to remember that, let's spend just as much time talking positively about how people can vote, about what the different options are, about the protections that are in place, as we spend talking about, potential problems, because there's definitely a time to keep working on making our system stronger. But right now, we've got to kind of try to live with what we've got and get people to turn out, because close elections are when we have problems. When people do things at the last minute, that's when we have problems. And so the more informed voters are, the more people vote early and don't, wait until the last minute, the fewer of those scenarios we're likely to see happen. And for people who are afraid about potential of violence or potential conflict at polling places, I don't think, based on what we've seen so far, and we've been talking to a lot of people and doing a lot of research, that this is something that we're likely to see a lot of in Maine, and that if there are attempts to cause disruption on election day, town clerks and officials and election wardens actually have quite a bit of discretion in saying, you are causing intimidation, you need to leave this polling place, and being able to call in backup to do that. We don't want that to happen, but they do have some discretion. But just what we want to encourage people is that if any of that starts to feel like discouraging and distressing, vote early, vote by absentee, get your ballot in, and don't worry about the potential risks of election day. So that's just something, especially as we're talking around trauma, around fears around some of these election day circumstances, being able to do absentee voting is a good way to help folks in those circumstances and to give another alternative. All right. That's sort of the big things that we wanted to touch on. Do you all have questions?
So before questions, hi, this is Dama with the Immigrant Welcome Center. Just wanted to add something. I'll start by thanking Anna and Lado and the partnership we've had for the last 2 years. Yeah, we've relied on your experience, the educational materials in different languages, and Lado's excitement about knocking on doors. So we've had a bunch of those, and now this year he's working with A-Class. But I just wanted to share a little bit about the other venue, and I'll touch a little bit on one personal story that I had with, there's an individual that I helped fill out his citizenship application earlier this year, and he was sworn in during COVID, and he was very sorry that he couldn't invite anybody there. So I reached out to him last week. No, not last week, 3 days ago. And I said, hey, I just want to make sure you're registered to vote. He said, not only am I registered to vote, but I already voted. So that was good. I said, what about your wife? He's like, no, she's not, she hasn't voted yet, but she's registered. So he gave me her number so that I can remind her to go and vote before the election day. Anyway, so on our side, I just wanted to share, in addition to conversing with Lado, we've been working with immigrant groups. We've had people just word to word. You work with community leaders, but also with individuals. You say, how many people do you know? From those people, how many can you ask them if they know someone else? So we are building kind of this database, whether they are registered to vote, whether they are not registered to vote, so that we can reach out to them. We are working with the Rwandan, Burundian, Angolan, Congolese. We're also working with 2 young girls, one Mariam, she's with Maine Youth Network, and Sama, she's with the, I don't remember the organization by Sudanese community, and we're trying to reach out to the young folks. And one of the questions that I've been having when they're collecting this information, people are asking them that what are they going to use with our information? Who's collecting the information? First, I'll say it's the Immigrant Welcome Center. What are they going to use our information with? I said, we're just trying to collect the information to make sure we know, because we're asking for names, address, and phone number so that we can update them on what's happening in their city, when is the early voting, and what's the latest deadline to mail in absentee ballots, where their polling stations will be, but also to remind them that they have to vote. But I'm adding to that saying that, you know, some of the politicians here, they don't call us because we don't have the power to show them. So this information will help us create this database. Here in Maine, we have more than 40,000 naturalized citizens. The 40,000 can tip an election in a way that we want. But if we don't have that database to kind of show these politicians whether they are Republicans or Democrats, they may take our vote for granted. How do we bring them to us so that they can hear our issues? Is by us having that information. We know we have this big number, but there's no location where you can say this voting block here can push this particular policy or this particular issue to be so that politicians can focus on it. So not only I'm encouraging them to get this information, but I'm telling them this information, it's public information. There's that skepticism among sometimes immigrants. What are they going to use our information with? One, I say it's public information. We just want to double check with the city clerk's office to make sure the address is still current so that you don't miss out on, because if you go there and the information is not correct, your vote may not count. So we want to double check, and if there's something missing, then we call you and say, hey, I think you changed your address, you went to a different town, you need to re-register before you go and cast your vote. So there are those, and most people don't know if they move, if they registered maybe 3 years ago, they're here, I'm fine. What if they move to a different town? So those are information that they need to know. So in collecting this information, telling them is to making sure that your information in the registrar, in the city clerk's registrar is up to date so that you don't miss out on casting your vote. Second, to be informed of what's happening in your city, town, in your city or town about elections, the deadlines, but also to build up this power base, this database that we can use to our advantage when addressing issues in the future. So that's the only piece I wanted to add on in these efforts. And you'd be surprised, we have these big buildings like 101 State Street, Franklin Tower, where we have some of our elderly people that need transportation, need interpreters to help them. So we also have individuals kind of collecting that information. And you'll be surprised to see those older people, they want to vote. They're the ones reaching out to us actually. Hey, what are you gonna do with that? How are you gonna help us? So we're trying to collect that information to make sure that everybody we reach to everybody who needs our help. With that, I don't know if Shima has anything to add to it, but I'll stop there and if anybody has a question.
No, the only thing that I would add, thank you, Damon, thank you, Lado and Anna for your wonderful presentation. And because I wear multiple hats, I want to say it's been a pleasure working with you, the two of you, the last 2 years. And it's exciting that we welcomed Eklis Ahmed on our team to be able to carry this work forward. I think there was a question posed in the chat, and I think this applies to both organizations. I think Andrew is the one who asked, tell us how you can get involved with your canvassing effort. I know that we at the center have been trying to recruit volunteers. So Dama, maybe speaking to that, who should they reach out to if folks are interested from the perspective of the Immigrant Welcome Center?
Yeah, if folks are interested, so we have our email info@Immigrant Welcome Center. I think I've also shared Eklas's email, eklas@Welcome Immigrant Welcome Center. I think she's our point person. And I think Celeste will be sharing, we'll be posting on our social platforms, and we'll be sharing that through emails as well about recruitment of volunteers. We are planning to do phone banks in the next 3 weeks, at least 2 times a week, with a plan to do a training on Monday and Tuesday, just for half an hour before we start those phone banks. I think the information will be sent out today by Celeste, but to reach out is either through the info@welcome at the Immigrant Welcome Center, welcome.org, or eklas@welcomeimmigrant.org.
And I think the easiest way for folks to get involved from the Democracy Maine League of Women Voters side would be to email Lado, which is just LADO at democracymaine.org. We also have some information posted on the events page of our website about times that we're doing the door-to-door program. This just reminded me that I wanted to mention a couple other organizations that I know are doing election work around the state, that we've done some work with Gateway Community Services, particularly focused in Lewiston, with Maine Youth Justice is doing voter turnout work, Capital Area New Mainers Project. We've done some work with folks in the Penobscot community who are doing a voter turnout project. Mano and Mano is doing a lot of work down east. I'm sure I'm forgetting a whole bunch of people, but it's really great how much work is happening within different communities and connecting to folks. And so I know we're always looking for additional folks, not just to come work with us, but if you're doing your own project and you want voter registration training or want some voter guides to hand out, or any other way that just to have a conversation. We also want to be a resource to help you do this work. And just along those lines, we're trying to do more and more of our work with translations. And right now we have on our website information about absentee voting in 5 languages. Let me actually screen share this. It's probably the easiest way to see. If you go to lwvme.org, under our elections tab, we have an absentee voting page that has the link to request your ballot, some information about deadlines and processes, and answering some frequently asked questions, as well as social media graphics to share. And we have that in Spanish, Portuguese, French, Somali, and Arabic right now. And then we also have, like Lado mentioned, we do a voting rights brochure. It's called Making Your Vote Count. We have that in those 5 languages plus English, and then our voter guide that includes a lot of that information plus information about candidates on this year's ballot, that we also have, I think, in Spanish, French, Arabic, and Somali. We're not doing that one in Portuguese this year, but all of those are resources that we're happy to share both online and in physical copies for folks who can use those. The voter guide is just out this week and is getting distributed. And it has a PDF version, a print version. We also have a poster that people can put up with voting information that you can download and print from this site. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is we work with the National League of Women Voters to do this site Vote 411. It has, you put in your address and it shows you your polling place, information about voting in your area, and what's on your ballot. And so we have reached out to candidates around the state to ask them to answer basic questions about, what their priorities are, what information voters should know about them. And so we have from president all the way down through select board, water district, judge of probate, all of that. We have information in here now for the full ballots for more than 100 towns. And we're continuing to work our way down into smaller towns. We want to have everything by election day to have full information about every town, but take a look at it and see what information is up about your town. I particularly find this helpful when I'm trying to figure out, we had a competitive race for Portland Water District. Both candidates filled out our questionnaire with a lot of information about them and why they had decided that running for the Portland Water District was important. And it was actually really helpful for me to be able to not just sort of not vote in that election or pick randomly because I didn't know about that smaller race. We know people in a presidential election, turn out because they're thinking about the president, but then they might not be thinking about school board, city council, these other races where their vote is going to be more likely to be, the deciding vote. And these are people who are making really important decisions that are impacting our everyday lives. So super excited about that. And then the other project that we have this year is a voter hotline and election observation. And the voter hotline piece is a resource that we have available where people can call the line, which I can put in the chat here. It's 207-558-3333, and people can call or text that phone number, email vote@lwvme.org, or go to Help Maine Vote at Facebook. It's Help ME Vote. And with any of those, we have trained people, including a former town clerk and some other experts who can answer questions around registration, voting. If you see something or get a response in your town that you're like, that doesn't sound right, let us know and we can flag that. Often we're seeing the town clerks are super busy and it's hard to get through to them for information. And so we want to kind of be a first line to help answer some of those questions for people. And I got a call from someone in Fort Fairfield in Aroostook County yesterday who had accidentally made a mistake on her ballot and couldn't figure out if she was allowed to get another one. So we were able to talk that through. I also got a call from someone in Westbrook who was trying to understand the charter amendment questions and was like, this seems strange that they want to increase the amount of money that someone can spend without needing city council approval. Is there a history behind this? And because we had done a pro-con arguments for Vote 411, we were able to kind of point him toward some information about this local ballot question. So we want to spread the word about those resources. The other things that are available for folks who might need help, because we only have within the league the ability to answer this in English. We also can refer people to the voter hotline that is run at the national level, which has election services in Arabic, various Asian languages and Spanish. And also on election day, the Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition runs a election day get out the vote and help center. And so folks there can also be connected to language resources. So we're trying to keep expanding these resources, even kind of though we're still in the middle of voting. Over 100,000 people have already voted in Maine. We also know the people who are going to need these resources are not the people who are tending to vote early. So we're going to keep trying to add things, get the word out about them up through election day. And then on election day, we are doing a observation program in person. And we're still looking for volunteers for this. And so that's another opportunity. If people are interested in that, you can either go to our website, on the volunteer page, we have a sign up, or you can email me. It's just anna@democracymaine.org. And I can connect you with our election observation program. We're going to be training people to spend a little time in polling places, just making sure things are going as they should be. We'll have resources if there is a problem to report and get help, but mostly what we're expecting is that things are going to go pretty well in most places, but that no matter what, there's going to be doubt. There's going to be people who say the election is invalid, and we want to be able to report out afterwards, being honest about any issues that have come up, but being overall able to talk about the things that went well so that we can validate the results of the election. So that is, if you're looking for something to do on election day, and don't mind going out in person, we are looking for folks to help us with that. There's a lot of partisan election observing going on, but there's a particular role, I think, for nonpartisan folks to be doing this as well.
I have a question, but before the question, I just wanted to add that I know you mentioned Mark, Mufalo, Abdullahi, and I are planning to do the get out to vote on election day. Mm-hmm. But the question I had about I had a question about the hotline, the local one. How many languages, so that if we share it, we want to make sure we stress out that these languages, when we're talking to our people, say, if you call, there'll be somebody who'll be speaking this language and this language.
So we don't have live interpretation with the hotline, but what people could do, and this is where we would call on all of you and folks in our network to help with helping people who would need help in other languages, is that people can leave a voicemail. Okay. Which we could then, it comes in as a little email file that we could then share out. And so I think that's something where we would love to have help, that if people would be willing to take calls or, respond to someone who would like assistance in another language, we would love to be able to build a database of folks who could take those referrals, because that's sort of how it works. Sometimes we're able to answer people's questions live, and sometimes we have to refer them out to someone who is able to give more specific information. So that would be really great if we were able to do that with language resources, and we could work with someone so you don't have to have, you don't have to know every piece of the elections information, but we could work together to be able to do that.
Yeah, the reason I asked that, because we are not doing it because sometimes with the elections you need some legal experts, and we don't have that expertise. But definitely, what I'm thinking, maybe we can have like a point person. If somebody calls, then you shout that point person. Then, depending on the language, I can coordinate with Mufalo and Abdullahi to kind of make people available for those translations.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, I love that. And that way, like, we work with the ACLU around this project so that if there are questions that are where we need legal advice, we can refer people to them to help resolve something. And if there's something town specific, we can refer people to their town. But like, I love the idea that we would be able to refer folks who need assistance in their own language to someone who can help them do that. So very cool.
Yeah, we'll make available someone, a contact person to kind of, if a translation is needed, just by you having one person that you can connect to from your hotline, I think that would be good.
That's great. Yeah.
So we're hitting the top of the hour. So I just want to appreciate Anna, Lado, Dama for sharing information about the work that you're doing around Get Out the Vote and voter registration. I do want to encourage folks to get in touch with any of the resources that have been shared and to be active in all of these different efforts, to get in touch with Democracy Maine, with Merck, with the Welcome Center, to engage in some of the efforts that they're doing. And we've also shared in the chat, Anna had mentioned that Mano and Mano, Gateway Community Services, Maine Youth Justice, the Penobscot Nation are all doing efforts as well. So reaching out to them, if that is more along the lines of the work that you're doing, would definitely be encouraged. I'd just love to close as we're at 11. Anna or Lado, if you wouldn't mind sharing just the single thing that you hope that all of us would do between now and Election Day to help with voter turnout.
Oh, good question. Think about who in your life you are not positive that they are going to vote, or that they're the people who are the most likely to procrastinate or have a lot going on in their lives, and reach out to those people. That is the most effective thing you can do, whether it's, one person or 10 people. Think about who you can be their voting buddy and help make sure that they can get to the polls or vote their absentee ballot.
What I can add is that make it a family affair. So there are people who will not vote and there are people who will not register. But if you make it a family event where everybody will sit on the table with their absentee ballots and all these things, it will become a tradition that people will see, the little people in the house will see that this is what our family do. And that will ingrain in them so that in the future, we don't have to worry about people who are not voting.
Amazing. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. Thank you to Democracy Maine and to the Greater Portland Immigrant Welcome Center for sharing the work that you're doing. And if you have any questions, reach out to folks. Now is the time. We're getting close to the election to get involved, to get your friends and family and other members of your community registered to vote and out to the polls. So thanks so much, everybody. And we'll talk to you soon.